Okay, good evening once again. So today we'll be looking at VBA variables. VBA variables. So if you talk about a variable is just a programming expression that is being stored at a particular place in the computer memory and it contains values. And since the variable value can be changed as the program runs, then its content can also vary based on how it is run or where it is run. And in VBA, variables can be created in a sub or a function. So if we have a function that receives any argument, be it an input argument for a sub, or let's say an input argument for a function, those input arguments are called variables or they are variables. And another thing is that it can be created in the sub or in the function. So it can be in the code procedure, inside the code procedure. And the variables in VB, they are case insensitive. So if I have my variable sum, and the sum is in lowercase, that is small letter s, small u, and small m, in one line of my document, if in the same sum or the same function, I define my new variable sum, but in this case, it is uppercase, capital S, capital U, and capital N. VBA will interpret both variables to be the same variable. So in VBA, it is best to define separate variables for separate tags to store separate values. And to use any variable in VBA, one must first define or declare the variable in the procedure, that is in the subs or in the function, in the sub or in the function. And to do that is to assign an identifier, either a dim identifier, private identifier, or a public identifier. So these identifiers are used to declare or define any variable to be used in the VBA project. And if one is to use the dim, dims are used inside or outside our procedures to create private variables to the code model. So let us say that we have our model, let's say model 1. And in the model 1, we have sub 1, sub 2, and sub 3. I can dim any variable inside any of the models or outside any of the models. So if I dim any variable before I define my sub 1 or I define my sub 2 or my function 1, that variable in the model can be called in any of the procedures. So I can call that variable into my sub 1, I can call it into the sub 2, or I can also call it into the function 1. But then if I define that variable in the sub 1 only, I can only use that variable only in the sub 1. So if I also dim any variable in the sub 2, I can use that variable only in the sub 2. And if I dim a variable in the function 1, I can use that variable only in the function 1. Only in the function 1. So just for a small representation. So as we all know, we have model, and in the model we have procedures. So taking this to be our model. So if you have this as our model 1, and in the model 1, we have several procedures. So let's say we have our sub 1, we have a sub 2, and we have a function 1. So in this model, we have 2 subs and 1 function. And if as I am in this model, just before I define my subs or my function, I dim my variable, let's say variable x, just before I write the subs and the function. If that's the case, then I can use that variable x in any of the sub and in the function. So I can call it from wherever it was defined into the subs or the function. But if I define it only in the sub 1, I can use that variable only in sub 1. If it's in function 1, I can use it only in function 1. So that is how the dim statements work. Now we have another way of defining a variable called the private statement. So these statements are used outside procedures to create private variables to the code model. So in this case, let's say I have my model 1. In the model 1, I still have my sub 1, sub 2, and function 1. 1, I want to define this variable privately. So I will define the variable before I define my subs and then function. And since it is only in model 1, I can use that private variable I've defined only in the model 1. So I can call it into either the sub 1, sub 2, or function 1. But if there is a second model, let's say model 2, with its own subs. So let's say in model 2, I have my sub. So I have sub 1 1 and I have sub 2 2. So in model 2, I have sub 1 1 and sub 2 2. If I declare or define any variable with the private statement, if it's in model 1, I can only use it in the procedures in model 1. That is, I can use it only in the sub 1 or the sub 2 or the function 1. And I can't call it into the model 2. But if I define any model, any variable as private in my model 2, I can use that variable in the sub 1 1 and the sub 2 2 only in the model 2 and not in the other model. And we have a test statement that can be used to declare or define a variable. That is the public statement. So the public is used just outside our procedures to create public variables to the code models. So let's say that I come into the model 1, and in the model 1, I declare my variable, let's say variable x, as a public. I can use that variable. I can use that variable in all the subs and the function in the model 1, and I can also use that public variable in the model 2. So if I declare a variable to be public, I can call it in all the models or the forms in the project, in the VBA project. So that is how to declare a variable. Either a dim variable that is to be used in a single model, a private variable also to be used in a single model, or a public variable to use in several models, that is more than one model. Now, how do we declare variables? So the model may be implicit or explicit. And the implicit models are those that allow a user to use variables without defining them. So let us say that we have our VBA model. So if we come into our VBA environment, so if I, with my shortcut Alt F11, I come into my VBA environment. Yes, sorry for this. And I add a new model. So my insert and I add a model, right? So if I add a model, inside the model that is on top of it, I have option explicit. This option means that if I want to use a variable, I should first define or declare the variable in this model. But if it is not explicit, or let's say it's implicit, or better so, if this part is blank, then it means it is of the implicit option. And in that case, I can use any variable without using the dim or the private or the public statement to declare or define the variable. And one good thing about the implicit model is that it is very convenient and it's mostly used for small projects. So if let's say I'm just working it only 2 models or just 1 model, I can leave it as it is. But the thing is, it can cause the variables to conflict since it is not defined or declared. And we have the explicit models. In this model, we first have to define or declare the variable before we can use. And if the said variable is not declared in the explicit model, VBA will not permit the code or the sub procedure to run. So an example is this. So if I come into this model, this is my model 1. So if I insert a procedure, here, I call this, so I will use a sub procedure, and I'll call it example. So in my example, and it's a public sub, I click on OK. So in this sub, since there is no option explicit over here, I can write my code without defining or declaring any variable. So let's say I have this variable, I'll call variable A, and I will assign a value of 5 to the variable A, right? So I will also show my immediate window. So this is my immediate window. So after I define my variable a, so sorry, a is equal to 5. I would like to print that a value in my immediate window. So I'll use the command or the statement debug dot print. And since I want to print variable a, I'll just bring my variable a after the print statement, and I will click on run. So if I run, I have my 5 printed over here in the immediate window. If my variable a is a value of 10, and I click on debug.print a, I have my 10 printed in the immediate window after the 5. So, but then if I make this model an option explicit model, and I click on run, it will say that variable not defined. So my variable a in the model is yet to be defined. So if I want to use my a in the model, I first need to define it. So that's if the model is explicit model. So I just have to define the a. So we will look into how to define variables in a very short time. And one good thing about the explicit model is that it improves code readability and it makes it very easier to manage the code. And also, unlike the implicit, it reduces errors by avoiding the naming conflicts. But in general, it is best practice to use the explicit models. So in general, it's best to use the explicit model. Now, how do we use the explicit model? So to use an explicit model in VBA, if you open your model or if you insert a new model, just before you write your subs or your function procedures, you enter the VBA statement option explicit at the top of the model. So if I come to my VBA environment and I add a new model, mine by default will add the option explicit model to it. But let's say that it is not added to it. So I just come to insert, I add a new model. So mine by default has it over there. So if yours, there is no option explicit on top of it, just type it over here. That is to make the model an implicit model, and that will work faster. So if it is very inconvenient to type the option explicit model after you have added a new model, there is some go-to response that we can use to cause our VBA to add the option explicit to every new model that we add to it. So if I come to my VBA environment, and if I go to tools, so in here, if I go to tools, so if I come to tools, and in tools, I look for options. So I click on options. In options, I look for the second option over here, which is require variable declaration. So if I check this button on, it will automatically add the option explicit to every model I add to my VBA project. So mine is already on. So if yours is off, it's best to check it on. So if I check this option on and I click on OK, if I add any new model to my project, it will have the term option explicit on top of it. And that's how to add new models to your VBA projects that contains the option explicit statement. So now in VBA, we have types of variables. But then if you define any variable and you don't assign the type of the variable, by default, it is of the variant type. Now the variant type in VBA means that it can hold any kind of variable. So it can hold all the types of variables in VBA. So in VBA, it is best to actually declare or define the variable with the exact type of data, Though it won't give you any error or any wrong responses or wrong results. If you don't actually define that variable to the type that it is supposed to be used in the project, it will actually take much space in your computer memory, and it will take a lot of time for it to assign itself that value you have assigned it to. So in VBA, we have several types of variables. These are some few ones. So if you have the Boolean type, that is mostly true or false. You have an integer that is minus 32,762 positive of the same value. We have dates. That is from midnight on 1st of January in the year 001 to 11:59 p.m. of the 59 seconds on the 31st of December in the year 9999. So this is the range of the type of data in VBA. So we have the long, which is short for long integer. That is also from this to this. We have double, which is for floating point numbers. And that is like the biggest form of integers over there. So minus 1.797 exponential 308 to minus 1.797 exponential minus 324. And this is for negative values. And we have a new set for positive values. And then we have the data type called that is used to house characters or words or text. So if let's say I want to define any variable as a word or as a character, I need to define or declare that variable as a string variable, So moving on. So objects in Excel are the familiar components of Excel, and we have worksheets, charts, toolbar, ranges, and also cells in the worksheets. Now, every object in Excel has its corresponding properties and methods that are with them. So if in Excel, if the objects are the nouns of the VBA language, our properties are like the adjectives that define those nouns in the VBA language. Now, we have the range as an object in Excel and also in the VBA. So this range object has the column width, number format, font, and value as the properties of that object, that is of the range object. And the thing is that if you have your objects in VBA or in Excel, in this case, the range object, if I want to view the object property, I will just bring a period, that is a dot, after I define that object. An example is this. So we have the range object that is linked to the cell B1, right? So the range is the object of the cell B1.
So do I have to download VBA?
This value is the property of the object.
Let me just screen record it.
B1 dot the value.
If you screen record, would they know that you're screen recording?
I'm not sure.
Have you tried before? Nah, abaya, nah, believe it.
And this becomes.
Where is my screen record? I bet you screen recording. Hey, Minibi.
Go to settings.
The object, the VBA object. The VBA object. So moving forward.
I said
we have inbuilt functions in VBA. And most of the functions in the actual lesson environment can also be found in VBA. We have the ABS function, that is for finding for the absolute value of any integer, any number.
Wait.
We have EXP function.
Go to control center.
We have the learn function. We have
Hello,
the left,
minutes.
and we have the right function. These functions that can also be used in the visual basic environment.
Yo, bye.
Control center. Yes, all time.
Also be used in the VBA environment.
Control center.
We have some functions in the actual environment in the VBA. We have some functions in the SL environment that in VBA have different names. So, like the function of lower, upper, and the line in SL. If we come to the VBA, we have our lower being the L case, we have the upper being the U case, and we have the line being the log. We have the line being the log. So, though some functions in SL are found in the VBA, have a different name, and calling them, you have to assign that name accordingly. However, those functions in the worksheet or in the actual SL environment can be called in our VBA environment and used. So if you have a function that is not in the VBA environment, and you have its corresponding function in the SL, and you like to use it in the VBA project, you follow our code statement application.worksheet function dot name. So this name over here just mean that you type in the name of the function that you want to call from the worksheet into the VBA, the name of the function that you want to call from the worksheet in the VBA. And after typing the name of that function, you will now feed in the function argument, that is the input of the function, if it has any. You see, some functions don't have input, like the pi function in the worksheet. So if, let's say for an example, if I want to call the pi function from my worksheet, my VBA project, I use my code statement application.worksheet.py. So this is our object, and we have our period dots, and this is the property of the object. But in this case, this property has its own property, that is the pi. So our object, that is the application, with the worksheet function as its property, and this function as a property has another property called the pi. Are we there? So if I want to bring in pi from our SL worksheets or our main SL environment into the VBA, I'll follow this code syntax. So I'll follow this code syntax. Moving forward. So yesterday, we look at some few models. Today, we will brush through what a user form is. So in VBA, we have some dialogues that we call them user forms, or forms for short. So the forms can be custom to suit what we want to use it for. And the form can be used to create SL application that stand on its own. So I'd like to show an example of a form that's got created some while ago. So let's say we have this SL application that is called the Numa SL that was done with SL user forms, right? So it just use for numerical analysis and for numerical method courses in the universities. So if we have our system of linear equations over here, and I would like to solve it and then show the steps in the solution of the unknown variables. So this is our equations. I extract my matrix of coefficient, that is my matrix A, and my vector of constant, that is this values over here. So if I want to solve and then see all the values at each iteration, so we have two major methods over here. You have the elimination and the iterative methods. So if I want to do the elimination method, I just click on this, and this form will appear. So this over here is a form that's been customized to solve linear equations. So I just select my worksheet A, my matrix A and matrix B, and we have two methods over here, the Gauss elimination and the Gauss Jordan. So keeping it as Gauss elimination, I select the output location of the cells. So I click on solve, and it will give me all the code procedure to get my x1. So in this case, it chooses x1, x2, x3. So we have the x1, x2, x3. So this is the x value from our linear equation, the y value, and then the z value from the linear equation. So that is a customized linear equation solver in Excel using the user forms. So forms can be used for several purposes. This is just one few of them. So a form can allow a user to input data, to make selection, or to trigger actions. And then form as objects have their own properties. So it has the color, the size, the position, the font type, and so on. And then every form as objects have methods and the event that are associated with them. So if you talk about SL user forms, its properties We have some few of them here. So we have labels, text fields, list boxes, check boxes, option buttons, ref edit, and frames. We will dive into this ones later. So if we want to add a form, if you want to add an Excel user form, right? So you want to add an Excel user form, we come into our VBA environment and we go to insert, and in insert, we select user form in this case. So I click on the insert button and I select user form. So if I do that right, I get an interface that fills my main window. So this interface here is the user form one by name on top of it. So if this is the user form, if I look on the right of my user form, I have my properties. So these are the properties of the user form that we can change for it to affect how the form appears. So we have the form name, which I can change to suit any name I like. We have the form name, the back color of the form, you have the border color, you have the border style, the caption. So if I change this value over here, this caption, it will change that text on top of the form. So if I change this to example and I click on enter, it will change it from user form one to example. We have the cycle, we have the draw buffer, we have enabled. So we have the forms. So there are several properties of the form that I can change and it will affect how my form appears to be. So if I want to change my back color of the form, I can just click on this drop down at the right of the back color and look through all the colors over here and pick one that suits my taste. So if, let's say, I prefer this color, it will change how the form appears to be. If I select color red, my form will change. So this is the back color of the form, right? Now, and we have the border color. So if the form has any border, and I select any color for the border, it will reflect on the form. So if you look at the base of this user form over here, and if we change how the form border color is, it will reflect on the bottom of the user form. So if I select red, okay, I think it will show once we run the form. So I'll just set it to default, that is the black. Yes, and that is it. So there are several things of the form that can be changed to suit the preference of the user or of the developer. But then if I click on the form, on the right of the form, I see this dialog that is called toolbox. In the toolbox, we have controls. In this control, we have this arrow or the mouse pointer. We have an A that if I bring my mouse, it says label. We have text box, we have combo box, we have list box, we have check box, we have option button, we have toggle button, we have the frame, we have command button, and we have tab strip. So there are several of them. We have multi-page, we have our scroll bar, spend button, image, unknown. I think this is ref edit. We will look at that later. This one is also ink edit. This is unknown, our slider, tree view, and then list view. So all these toolbox or the controls in the toolbox can be used to affect our form. So if the form is an object, and these things over here are the object property, that is our form properties. These controls in the toolbox are also objects that can interact with our form. So if I want to interact the form with any of the objects here, I'll just select the object on the control and I'll bring it over here into the form. So if I want to add any label to the form, I'll just click on my label control or the label object and I'll bring it into the form. So if I click on it and I get closer to the form, it will show a dark cross, a black cross. So I just click on where I want it to be in the form and it will be printed over there. So we have label one over here. So now, if I select the label, since it's an object, it will show its properties. So if I select the label and I look on the left of the form, I see our properties window. And in here, I see label 1 as label. So this is the label name. This is the label caption. So if I change that which is in the caption, it will change that which is in the label. So if I change it to example, and I click on enter, it will change from label 1 to example. So if I want to effect any change to my label, I will change it from at the caption and it will reflect in the label. And if I want to change the color of the font, I can do so likewise. So that's how to make changes to the label. That is, if you just want to make any changes to the caption. If I want to add several controls or new controls, I'll just click back my form and my toolbox or my control box will appear. And I will select, I'll drop it here. I will select, I'll drop it here. So back in my label once again. So we have our example as the caption of this label. So if I want to change my font type, or let me say assign a new font size to it, I look for the font property of the label. So I have to look through this. So if I look through this, I see the font over here. I will click on this three dots, or I will double click on the font. So if I click on the three dots, new dialog opens. A new dialog will open. So we have the font dialog. So in this dialog, I can change the font type, my font style, and the font size. So if I want the Times New Roman, I'll just select this. If I like it to be bold, I select the bold and I change the font size right here. So there are several font types in the VBA as there are in the actual lesson environment. So I can select any font type in the actual lesson environment, also in the VBA environment. Yes. So let me just click on OK. So let me choose the font size 12. So okay. So we have our example now bolding and of a bigger size. So if I want to change the font color, I will look for the font color and I will click on the drop down arrow and I will change all the colors. I'll just select the color of interest. So let's say I want to be red. I'll select the red color and it will reflect over here. If I like it to be white, I select white, blue, I select the color, and so on. So I'll just set it to the default black. So this is how to edit any label on the user form. So back to the form. So we have other objects that we can also add to the form. Yes. So if I want to add a text box to the form, so let's say I have this as my label. I have this as my label, and now I want to add a text box. So I come here, I click on the text box, I drop it in here. So I have my text box over here. If I want to add combo box, I do same. I click the combo box, I drop it in here. So same as the label, if I want to edit my text box, the type of font that should go into the text box, its color, its font size, and everything. I click on this text box, I see its properties, and I edit it in the property. So if I want it to be color red, I just come to the font color, and I click on the drop down. I select palette, I look for red. I click on red. So if I put any text in this text box, it will appear color red. So for an example, look for text in the property window. So it's over here and type in any text. So if I type 89, if I type 89, it will appear red. So if I change my font color, let's say back to the window text, and I type text, now it will appear black. So if I change anything in the property window, it will have its effect on that object that is linked to. If I want to add any more objects, I click on the user form and my toolbox or the control box will appear. And I will just make additional changes to it. So let's say I want to add a multi-page. a multi-page. So I look in my toolbox and I click on multi-page and add the multi-page to this section. So in the multi-page, by default, it will add only 2 pages to itself. So there is the page 1 and then the page 2. But if you want to add extra pages, let me adjust this right. So I have my page 1 and my page 2. So I want multi-page here, this multi-page. So now let us say that if I choose our multi-page, I want it to select the first one. So we realize that if you go to multi-page objects, each property will display over here. We have the fonts, we have the font color, the height, the help context ID, the left multi-row, the start, the tab index, and then the tab stop and the value. Okay, I think it will answer one, the value of 1. The top and the width and so on. So now in the multi-page, we have the page 1 and then the page 2. So you see, if I click on the drop down over here, that is supposed to show all the objects on my user form. I don't see any page 1 or page 2 here. But if I come into my multi-page and I click on this, now it just shows me the page 1 and the page 2. So if I want to add extra pages, I'll do so in the VBA environment. That is behind the scenes, and it will reflect on the form, right? Or better, so I can right-click and add new pages. So add new page, there will be a page 3. Right-click, add new page, there will be a page 4. If you want to delete pages, I right-click, I delete the page that I right-click. I do same for any page I don't want in my worksheet, in my user form. In my user form. So for an example, we'll be looking at a simple example here. An example where a form is used to calculate for the idle gas volume of a gas, right? By feeding in the number of moles, the temperature, and then the pressure of the particular gas in question. Of the gas in question. So if let's say, so in this example, so we are asked to calculate for the ideal gas molar volume by feeding in our pressure and our temperature with the number of moles. Yes, with the number of moles. So if I come here, let's say I'll add a new user form. So I can either go with the inserts, I click on the user form, or I can just come here, this drop down, select user form, right? So any method that works for you. Now, since in this case, I'll be feeding in our moles, our temperature, and our pressure. There are 3 inputs, and it is set to give me my volume at the mole, temperature, and the pressure. Right. So in that case, I'll need 3 labels for each of the variables that I know, and then 3 test boxes for each of the variables that I know. So I'll just click on the label, now add 3 variables to it, to our user form. So I click on label, and I drop it over here. So let's say this label is assigned to our moles. So I come to caption. In the caption, I will change this to moles, right? So I'll bring my column. Let me leave a gap and bring a column. So I close it. Now this is very small, so I come to the font property of the label and I will change, let's say I'll broaden it, and I'll also increase the type of font. So let me set it at 14. So yes, this is better. Now if I look, let me just extend this a little. So there are several properties that can be assigned to it. So in here, we have the text align. So by the look of this model, it is aligned to the left, but I like to align it to the right. So I'll just click on this drop down and select the three, form text align right. So I'll align this label to the right so that it will be at the far right of the user form. So now I have one for my most. So now I will do same for my temperature label, my pressure label, and my volume label. So if I come here, I drag and drop, Okay, so I just put control and I copy. So if I come to this, since my pressure and my temperature are not known, I'll just set this one to the temperature. And I'll set this caption to pressure. Right. So now I have my most and my temperature and my pressure variable as a label. But then these ones are just labels. So if I want to feed in any value, I have to add them via a text box. So if I want to put in my mole value, I have to add text box to our user form. So I click on the text box and I add to my my user form. So I can adjust it for it to suit my size and my font. So I come to the font property of the text box. I double tap and I select, let's say, I want it to be of the size 12. So I click on 12 and I click OK. So since I like the other labels to have the same font size, I will just control and copy. I hold control and I'll drag. Right. So now I have text box for most, text box for temperature, and text box for pressure. So these are my input text boxes and input labels. And since I want to get the value of the volume, if I feed in more T and P, then let me just copy this last line and change it to volume. So in here, I'll change the caption in here to volume. So if I look at it right, or if you look at it right, if you come over here to our more text box, we have it to be called text box 1. Our next is for the temperature, that is text box 2. Our pressure text box is text box 3. And our volume text box is text box 4. So each of these text boxes has its assigned name. And I can change these names to suit what I want to do. But for this example, I'll just leave it as it is. So if I am calling for the value of the mole, I'll call it from the text box 1. That is, its name is text box 1. If I want my T value, I'll call it from the text box 2. If I want my P value, I'll call it from the text box 3. And after I'm done, if I want to show my volume value, I'll assign it in my text box 4. Right? So let me just align this also to it. So now I have boxes for each of them. And this caption of the form is user form, right? So I will also change my caption to, let's say, idle gas volume calculator. So idle gas volume calculator. So it will reflect in here. So if I click on run, it will show how this form will appear in the worksheet environment. So if I click on the run sub button, it will show in my worksheet. So this is how it will appear when I run it. So we have the moles, we have the temperature, we have pressure, and we have the volume. We have the labels and then the text boxes on the right of it. So if I close this and we come back to our SQL environment, this is taking a little time. So if you come here, it says insert a form as we've done that, and we change our caption from our user form 1 or user form 2 based on your VBA project to idle gas volume, okay? And you add labels for each of the variables in the idle gas equation. Note that the idle gas equation is given as the idle gas equation can be given as PV is equal to nRT, right? nRT, nRT. Right, where this our P is for pressure, our V is the volume, our N is the number of moles, and our T is the temperature. On our R to be our idle gas constant. So for an R value of 8.314, we will assume that our T is in Kelvin, our mole is in kilomole, or let's just say mole. Okay, our volume is in meter cube, and our pressure is in kPa, kilopascal, right? So that is if the R value is 8.314. So if in this formula, I want to find for the volume after I have my pressure, my R and my T, and also my N, our volume from this is just going to be, so my nRT over my pressure, right? My nRT over my pressure, So if I have my N and my T and my pressure, I can get my volume. And since R is constant, I can just say that this formula is just 8.314 NT over the P, So if I come back to my VBA environment, this text box is for moles, this is for temperature T, this is for pressure, this is for the volume. But then, if I want to get my output as I run this code, I should assign a new object to it, so that if I click on that object, it will return the value of the volume into its text box. That is, it will return my volume into the text box for me to view the results. So I'll just adjust this a little. I'll adjust this a little. Let me see. And so I can also use the top property. So if I come here and I look for top is here 72. If I set it to 70, it will shift up. So let me say 65, 63, 62, or 61. So I think this is better. So let's say I also make this one 70. That is too much. 80, 82, 85. Let's just make it 87. Yeah. So now we have it in that order. So I'll add a new object. And this object, I'll add a command button object. So what it does is, it is used to run events. And then also, it is used to tell the code to run based on whatever command you set it to. So I look through my controls and I locate my command button. So I just click on the command button and add it to my user form over here. So it will show as this. So if my command button is selected, I can edit its property in the property window. So we have the name to be command button 1. I'll leave it as it is. Now I'll set my caption to solve, right? To solve. And also I can adjust the height of the command button. Let's say I want it to be 20, and I can adjust its width. I want to be 68, or let's say just 60. Yes. And I want to change my color of the font on the command button. So I'll just look for 4 color. I'll click on the drop down and I can tune it over here. So I've changed my font color to blue in this case. But let's keep it at red to make it very visible. So red, right. And I can also make that font bold by coming to my font property of the command object, command button. I click on bold and I increase the fonts to font size 10. Okay. Yeah, so that's done. Yes. So we have this to be our window. So if I click on the run button, this is how it will appear in my Excel worksheet when I run it. So this is how it will appear if I run it. So after running, I can just, so if let's say I have assigned those code statements to my command button, that is the solve button, I can put in my values for the most, for the temperature, and for the pressure, and it will return its corresponding volume. So the V at N of 12, T at 456, and P at 124. If I click on this, it should have given me my volume, right? But since that is yet to be done, and we have to do that later on, we will proceed with it. So if you want to assign any command or any control to our command button, I will double click on the command button. So if I double click on it, a new model that is for the form will open. So in this model, I have on top option explicit. That means that I can only use variables after I've defined or declared them. So in the option explicit model, I need to define my variables. So in this sub, that is after I clicked on my command button, it brought me into this sub. So in the sub, it says private sub command button 1 underscore click into bracket. So this name over here is the click event of the command button. So in other words, if I write any code statement in between the private sub and the end sub, and if I run my user form and I click on the solve button in the form, it will run all those code statements in between this private sub and the end sub. So this over here is a click event of the command button one. So if I want to change any event of the command button, I can just come here, and there are several events of the command button that we can change and then work with in our VBA project. So if I want the double click events, I select DBL click. If I want the enter event, I select enter. If I want the error event, the exit, the key down, the key press, there are several of them. The before drag over. So let's say I want a double click event. So I just click on double click. So you see, it will create a new sub. So if I double tap on the solve button after I have run it and it's showing my Excel application, in this case, it will come and run all the code statements in between this line. So in this space provided over here, that is if it is double clicked. But if I single click, it will run those in the click event sub. So since we are into the click event sub, I'll just clear this. Though if it is blank, it won't do any injury to the VBA project, so we can let it be. But let's just take it out. So back to my user form, we have 4 text boxes with its corresponding labels and our command button that is called a solve. That has a solve as a test in it. So the text box 1 is our value assigned to the moles, and our text box 2 will fetch our value for the temperature. Text box 3 will fetch the value for pressure, and our text box 4 will show the volume after we have been fed with N, T, and P. So now, if I want to use any variable in the option explicit model, I need to first define them. So in my click event of the command button 1, I will define several variables. And since I am dealing with the ideal gas equation, I'll use the P for pressure, V for volume, N for moles, and T for temperature. And then the R for my gas constants, right? That is the 8.314. So just after my private sub command button 1 click event sub, I will define my P, T, V, N, and R variables, right? But in the variable definition, you can either use the private statement, the dim statement, or the public statement. But in this case, since I will just use it in my private sub in the model, I'll use the dim statement. So I will dim the PTVNR variable in my private sub command button 1. So I will dim those variables. So I'll start by entering the dim statement and I'll bring that variable. So our variable is, we have variable P, variable N, variable R, variable T, and variable V, right? But after dimming, I need to assign the type of variable to these variables, else it will assume that it is variant. And if I run this code statement, though it will give me the right values, it will take time to give me the results. And it will occupy more computing space or use more computing power and occupy more computer space. So since pressure is a P variable, I would like to say that it's a double variable, double type variable. So I will name the P as a double. I will name the N also as a double. So I'll name the R as a double. I'll name the T. So now let's say that I will only feed a T as integer. So I'll do the T as an integer. So integer. And my V will also be a double. So now I have named my P, N, R, T, and V variable in my model. Now since R is constant, I'll just assign its value after I've named. So R is a value of 8.314. Now after defining the R value, I have to also fetch my P values, my P value, my N value, and my T value from our user form. So one last look, our text box 1 is what will house the value for the mole. Text box 2 will house the value for the temperature, and text box 3 will house the value for the pressure. So that means every value of P that I will use in my encode statement will be obtained from the text box 1. And since I want the text in the text box 1, I'll use the text property of the text box to get that text value. So the P is in the text box 1. The text box 1.text. So the text is the property of the text box 1, right? So that will fetch me that value of the text box 1. But since the P itself is a double variable, that means I must convert that value in the text box 1 to a double type value, right? And to do that, I will precede the text box 1.text with a CDBL statement. So what that means is that it just take that value in there and it converts it to a double value. So even if I type in an integer in my text box 1, it will convert that integer to a double, right? So it is, so we have CDBL and we open bracket. So I have put my text box 1, the text in a bracket. So any value that I enter in my text box 1, that value will be taken and to be converted to a double variable type value and to be assigned to my variable P. Now, in VBA, we define a variable with the unknown on the left and the known on the right. So in this case, my P is the unknown. And if I put in my value in the text box 1, that means I know the text box 1 or text value. So I have assigned that value to my variable P. So I've assigned that value to my variable P. So I'll do same for the moles. So sorry. My pressure is rather the text box 3, and my moles is the text box 1. So moles is over here, text box 1. T is over here, text box 2. Pressure is text box 3. So I need to change this value over here to 3, right? So I'll just also now define for my moles. So mole is in my whole statement is n. So n is equal to, so since it's also a double precision type variable, I have to use the CDBL. So CDBL text box 1 dot text. And I'll fetch my T. So my T for the text box 2, right? So CDBL text box 2 dot text. So what this lines of code does is it just fetch those values in the text box and assign them to our variable P, N, or T by first changing those values in there to a double precision type value, a double type value. So now I have my PTN value, and I know my R value also as defined here. So what I don't know now is the VIN. And then VIN was in the text box 4. But since I will assign my VIN value to the text box 4 value, by default, or per this example, it is unknown. So with my known P and T, I will solve for the VIN. So VIN is equal to, in my VBA formula, we have nRT over P. So my N, so I just put my numerator in a bracket. So the N times the R times the T, all on P. So now my VIN is known. So after I have obtained the value of VIN, I will assign that VIN value to the text box 4. To the text box 4. So after I have obtained VIN, I will say that text box 4 dot text is now the value of VIN. So from this line, VIN is known. Our text box 4 is not known. So I have assigned the known to the unknown. So I think I am done here. So if I run this sub or this user form by clicking here, it pops up. Let's say I want to swap at 10 moles, 350 Kelvin temperature, and then 120 kPa. So if I click on solve, I have my volume in meter cube to be 242.491666. So if I change this value over here to be 100, and I click on 4, it will change my volume in the third text box. If I change the N, it also changes. So I can add several of them. So based on the purpose of the box, it may look very different from this. One way to make codes in VBA a little attractive is to group them by the use of the frame. So I will readjust this. And in this case, I will separate my output, that is my volume, both text and text box. I'll bring it a little below. So if I select all this and I put these objects, so I'll just hold my shift and I'll select them. So I am cutting this. I will insert a frame. into the user form. So if I add the frame, I can adjust its caption. So I'll just say that it had a caption of input. So input. So in this frame, I will paste what I copied over here. Now I'll readjust it once more. Yes. So we have it to be like this. So you see, this is our input box. And if I want to create another box that is for the output, I can just once again copy this, and I will either copy or cut, but I rather cut. So I'll Control X, and I'll add a second frame. I'll adjust this frame also. So I'll adjust the frame. After all is done, I'll paste my volume label and my volume text box in the label, in the frame. So I select the frame and I paste it, paste in the frame. But then this frame is longer in width than the second one, so I'll just readjust it. Yes. Now I change this caption from frame 2 to results. So we have this to be like this. So if I run this, it will, I'll feed in my inputs. So let's say 10 moles, 450 kelvins, and 200 kPa pressure. Now just click on solve. So I have my volume to be 187.065 meter cube. So frames can actually group them into sections so that it will be very easy to identify which sets are for different purposes. As in this, the moles, the T and the pressure are the inputs, and the volume is the result, that is the output. So that's what the text box, the labels, and the command button are mostly used for. So the text box is used to ask for a value, an input value. So it will ask for an input and it will use it. Now I can use my text boxes in functions so that I can write any function behind this and I will call the function in my user form. So if in this case I choose not to put my main function in here and I define a function in VBA like we did the last time, I'll come to insert. Now insert a procedure. So this is a function procedure. So I'll click on function and let's make it private. So I'll call it volume, just volume, right? And I'll click on OK. So our function name is volume, right? So this volume must take the P, the T, and the N and get its actual value. So now inside my function, I need to specify its input argument. So I will say that my T, and this T I will dim as a double. So T as double, N as double, and P as double. So even in the function, I need to dim all my input variables and also my function output. So after getting my first line of the function, if I want to return it as a double, I also enter after my close bracket as double. That means that if it takes in the T, the N, and the P, it will return a double type value as an answer. Are we there? So now if I have my T, P, and N, I just say that volume is equal to, so in here, the R is a constant value, right? So it's NRT, so N times 8.314 times the t from the input over the p. So this becomes my function. So I can replace this line over here with my function, and that is the volume. So if I enter volume and I bring my open bracket, it will ask for the T, that is in this case, my temperature T. And to ask for the amount of substance, that is the mole, that is the N. And the pressure will be P. And I'll close this bracket. So if I run this user form on this sub, and I enter my mole of 12 at 600 kelvins and 120 kPa, if I click on the solve button, something is okay. So since in my endowment of the T variable, in my command button one click event, I said the T variable should be an integer. And in the function, I assign that T variable to be a double. So both must be the same variable type. So I think I'll change this T from integer to double. So let's make this a double type integer, right? So if I run this and I put in the value of mole to be 10 at 450 Kelvin and 120 kPa pressure, and I hit on solve, we have our volume as displayed here. So I can do several things with it. Several things with it. I can add combo box, list boxes, and so on. So let's say that I want to add combo boxes to this. So that I will set my very own list of modes that I want to work with. List of modes that I want to work with. So that anybody who uses this Excel application will be forced to select from the list. So I can use the combo box or the list box to show that information. So if I want to use my combo box, I will just click on my text box and I'll take it out. And I'll replace the text box with a combo box from my control box or my toolbox, right? But before that, if I want to see any event of the user form, like I did for the command button, I double click, right? So if I want to go into what entails in the user form, I can double click on the user form and it will open its events. So if I double click on this, an event open. So you see that private sub user form click. Since I click on the form, this is the event I will get, right? So if I come in the top right corner of my code model, there is this drop down. So in this, we have several events: activity, activate event, add control event, before drag over, before drop or paste, the click event, double click, deactivate, error. We have several events here that we can work with, right? So we will look at that later. So back to my user form. If I want to restrict our user to choose several values for the moles and not enter his own values of the mole, I can replace this value, this text box object, with a combo box object so that it will show the list of modes that the user is supposed to enter in there. So if I select this and I remove this from here and I add my combo box over here, so I want it to be of the same length as our text box. So I'll check my text box property, that is for the width. So its width is, it is about, okay, something is missing. It's about 114. So I'll just do the same for this. So 114. So now they are of the same, width. And the font type, I'll just come to my font and I'll set my font type to the same Tahoma, but in this case, size 12. Right. So if I click on this, this is how the combo box will appear on the user form. So it is serving as a drop down. So I'll have to put in all the things I want to show in the drop down so that my user will be forced to select from it, right? So now let's go into adding the values into the combo box. So note that if I click on the combo box, in my property window, it is named combo box 1, right? So let us come into our user form. I double click to get my form click event. But since I want it to give me some values before I proceed, I will select the initialize event of the form. So I will select initialize. So this gives me a new event. So I can just take away this event. So in this new sub, private sub, our user form underscore initialize, I'll put in all the values of the combo box 1 I want to show if the form is run or if the form is open, right? So I'll use the add item property of our combo box 1. So I'll come inside this. I'll say that combo box 1, that was its name, dot add item. So you see, it just show over here. So now it said that pvag item. So just asking for the item name. So I just add the item to be, let's say, 1, right? So this is 1. So now if I run this, I run our user form again, and I click on this, you have item 1 in here. So if I want to add several items, I can do the same for each one of them. So combo box 1 to add items, I can do the same thing. So this time I'll add 2, I'll add 3. So I'm just doing for 4. Now add 4. So if I run this and I click on the drop down of the combo box, I'll get 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. So if I select this, it will display and I can proceed. So it's either I do it this way or I also use the with combo box property method. So since I'll be doing it for that same combo box and 3 extra times, I can do it very quickly and very small by using the width property. So with combo box 1, and I'll end my width. So this will just fetch our combo box. So in there, I want to work with the add item property. So the add item. So I will add 1. So the same thing, the add item, I'll add 2, the same thing, and I'll add 3. So let's make it 3. 4. So now I have 4 items in my combo box. So if I run this, like the previous one, it will give me 1 to 4. So 1 through to 4. Let's just close this. So now, what if after the form pops up, I want to show 1 in the combo box before I click on the drop down? In that case, I'll use the combo box 1.text event. So in this case, I'll use the text property of the combo box object. So that is combo box 1. So dot text, since I want what is in the combo box, and I'll set it to 1. So if I run this, it will show 1 before I will select from the list, and it will change to that which I select. So let's just close it. So if I come back to my command button 1 sub for the end, since I have changed it from text box 1 to combo box 1, I have to change this statement over here. So I'll make it combo box 1. So now if I run the sub and I select my modes from this, I assign my T of, let's say, 200 kelvins and a pressure of 120 kPa. If I click on solve, I have my volume to be 27.7133. But in this case, I have used a combo box for the most inputs. So I'll just close it. So in the same way, there is list box. So if I want to use the list box, that will take a while. So let me just add a new user form. So I'll just click on the list box. We have it over here. Now, this list box looks like a blank box. So you add your values or your variables to it for it to house many information. So if I click on run to run this form, it will show as a blank form with white markings for the list box. So if I click on the list box, it shows me several properties of the list box. So we have the bound column, we have the column count, we have the column heads, we have the control source and the control type test. We have several properties of the list box. So if I want it to house about 2 or 3 columns, I just come to the column count and I change it from there. So I change the column count to 3. That is, this list box will have 3 columns. So if I click on run, it will show to I add values to it. It is having 3 columns. So let's see. So if we come into our quiz statement, and in this case, I want the form dot. So I want the form initialize event. So I'll click on initialize, and this will show. So I'll just clear this from there. Now in this, let's see how to edit our list box. So in the form event, we have our list box, right? In this case, it is called list box 1. So if I type list box 1, and I click on dot, we have several things over here. So like the combo box to ask for an add item. So we have several of them: list box clear, list box column count, our column heads, control source. So let's just try the add item and see something. So add item. So I'll just add item food. And now let's run and see. So if I run, food will show in here. So I can keep on adding item and item and item. So if I add another item to this, let's say I'll just call this foods. And I click on the run event. There are 2 things. But also, it's best to set my number of the columns in the code statement before I proceed. So let's set list box 1 dot column count, right? And I'll say that I have 2 columns. So let's run this to see. Okay, so the same thing happening. That's good. So plenty items can be added to the list box to suit the preference of the user or of the designer and the purpose it is intended for. If we come in here, we have the check button. So if I want to use the check button, so I'll just click on the check button over here and I'll add it to my form, my user form. So if I click on this and I bring it to the form and I add it, it will have its own property on the property window. You have the name to be checkbox 1, we have the accelerator, which will just give you an alphabet that has been underlined in there. So if I set this to E, my first E is going to be underlined, but that's for the purpose here. So I'll just change this caption to, let's say, value, right? So now the text box just give out two values, either a true or a false. So if it is checked, it will return true, that is 1 in VBA. If it is false, it will return false, that is 0. So if I add a new command button over here, and in this command button, I just call the caption show. And let's say I click on the command button event, and I say that message box, our check box 1 dot value. So it will check if it is true or if it is false. So if it's empty, it will return a false statement. And if it is checked, it will return a true statement. So for the check boxes, it is either true or false. And it can be used to look through several lines of code on one VBA form and give you several outputs as the user demands. And we have the option button or the radio button. So if I take out this, let me just extend my user form to house bigger things. So if I click on this and I add it to my user form, let's say I adjust my caption. Let's call it test 1. Let me reduce this. Test 2. So if I run this, so the thing is that for our option button, our radio button, if there are two or more in the same place and one is selected, the other is automatically deselected. So in this case, if I select S1, my test2 is set blank. If I select S2, my test1 is rather set blank. That is for the radio button or the option button. So if I put this whole thing into one frame, so I'll just cut it. Now insert it in a frame. So a simple frame. So I'll add several others. Let me just call this test 3 and call this test 4. So in a simple frame. So if, let's say, in this example, I click on the run event and I select my text 1. If I select my text 2, my text 1 is set blank. Text 3 will set the text 2 blank. Text 4 will set the text 3 blank. Since all 4 are in the same place on the user form, only one can be true and the others will be set to false. But if I have several others outside my frame, any of them, so one of those in the frame can be true and one of the buttons outside the frame can also be true. So in this case, if I run this, so you see they are in different places on the user form, so both can be set to true. Let me just close it. Now frame we are used to, and we have command button that we are also used to. We have the tab strip. So the tab strip, let me just add a new, okay, let me just add it here. So the tab strip. So it just add several tabs to your environment. So if I add a new form over here and I add a tab strip to it, it will give me several tabs. So we have tab 1 and we have tab 2. So if I want to add a new tab, I can just right click and select new page. So tab strip work like the multi-page, where it can give you several pages on your user form. So this for tab strip. If I extend this and I add multi-page, I get multi-page. So you see, almost the same. And next is the scroll bar, the scroll bar, the scroll bar. So if I insert it in my user form, if there are several information that are inside the form and deep below than the height of the form, I can use this to move them and bring them to life. So if I click on the one, I can just be going through and it will go to the entire height of the form, so that if there's any information that is deeper in there, it will bring it up and you can be able to observe them. You have the spin button, you have the image that is used to add pictures to your VBA project or your VBA environment. We have the ref edit. So this ref edit is used to fetch values from the worksheet onto the VBA project or the VBA form, and also to send values from the VBA form onto your worksheet. An example is this. So if I put this ref edit over here and I click on the run, it becomes here. I can click on this black arrow, black marking, and it will become something like this. And I can select any cell over here or range of cells and click on enter. So I can read any value on the worksheet with the ref edit control. With the ref edit control, any value at all on the worksheet can be known or actually taken in record with the ref edit. And we have the ink edit, the unknown. The slider is used to move from left to right and also to adjust values. So if I add a slider to this, I can adjust its value to any value I want. So in the slider property, there is minimum and there is maximum. So if I set my maximum to 50 and my minimum is, let's say, 30, it can only look from value of 30 to value of 50, not more than that and not less than that. Let me just take it off. And we have the tree view control and the list view control, which is very, very relevant. And we won't talk much about that for now. So back to our gas user form. So what if after I have solved for the volume, I want to close the form but not to click on the red button at the top right of the form? But then I want to create a new button that I'll just hit on it and it will close or unload the form. So in that way, I'll just copy this command button and I will change the color. I think I will set this one to something different. So green. Now set this to red. So this I'll call close or exit. So in the exit, if I click on this, it should unload or kill the form. so that it will be no more in my Excel application workspace. So if I come in the exit command, I just say that if I click on the exit, it should unload the form. To unload me, where the me is the form in question. So in this case, me is the form name user form 2. So it should unload that user form 2, wherever it is in the Excel application. So if I click on this and I put in my values, any value at all, if I click on solve, I have my volume at this NTMP. And if I click on exit, it will kill the form. It will unload the form from the Excel worksheet. Excel worksheet. So this is how to use forms in VBA. And it can be used for several other applications. It can really come in handy when you are doing plenty stuff that needs to be automated. Thank you very much. Please, any questions? Any question? Any question? Okay. Question has come. Okay, then. If there is no question, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for joining. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you.